I'm a bit concerned that my honourable friend doesn't share the enthusiasm that I have for free ports and investment zones. I think the example from the past in Wales, when inspirational Secretaries of State like the late Lord Crickhowell, Peter Walker and the Lord Hunter Wirral demonstrated that through enterprise zones and the Development Bay Corporation, for example, in Cardiff, that the economy was transformed and regenerated. I am confident that in our approach to investment zones, we will make sure that Wales shares in the growing prosperity that we want to see right across our United Kingdom. And I believe that it will generate more investment and to grow that economic pie that is the aspiration of this government.
Lady Sybil Roberts.
His government has been forced to U-turn on its fundamental ideology that slashing taxes magically leads to economic growth. That same ideology underpins free ports and investment zones. Both will shrink the UK government's tax revenue and, in turn, the Welsh government's budget, which is already facing a £4 billion shortfall. With inflation now over 10%, what's he doing in Cabinet to protect Wales's budget?
No stay.
Well, I'm grateful to the Right Honourable Lady, and I yield to no one in my admiration of her, but she has now laid bare Plaid Cymru's ideological approach to things. They believe that it should be an ever-shrinking share of wealth that means that our public services will decline. We on this side of the House believe that the way to pay for public services is to grow our economy, and it's through initiatives like the free ports and investment zones that we will do just that. And I do hope the Welsh public note Plaid Cymru's ideological opposition to growth.
Roberts.
The Secretary of State's on record as saying he believes it's right to make cuts to public spending. And that was before last week's multiple U-turns. Now, according to the Glasgow Centre for Population Health, the last Tory austerity experiment led to 335,000 excess deaths. How many excess deaths is he prepared to justify this time round?
I'm sorry, hyperbole from the Right Honourable Lady does not at all help her case. And we are not talking about so-called austerity, but we're talking about making sure that the public spending round that was agreed last year will be efficiently and wisely spent. And I said that it was right for each department to look carefully at its priorities to make sure that frontline services, the sort of services that I know she and I believe in, are maintained for the benefit of the citizens we serve.
Stuart C. MacDonald.
Number 2, please, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, with permission, I will answer questions 2, 5, 11 and 15 together. We have taken action to support households and businesses across Great Britain, including Wales, through schemes such as the Energy Bill Relief Scheme and the £400 Energy Bill Rebate. The Welsh Government has been very well funded to deliver their devolved responsibilities, with the largest ever block grant of £18 billion in the 2021 spending review.
Stuart C. MacDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Secretary of State's U-turn during the Tory leadership election was indeed truly eye-catching. But the U-turn most concerning people in Wales just now is the government's U-turn on properly protecting benefits and pensions against skyrocketing inflation. Is the Minister going to be U-turning on that commitment too, or will he fight a good fight in favour of proper uprating?
Well, Mr. Speaker, this government will always be committed to supporting the least well-off, and that is, of course, why we have come forward with schemes such as this £650 payment for those who are on benefits, £300 for pensioner households and £150 for those who are disabled. If the honourable gentleman is really worried about the cost of living, perhaps it's time that he got his government to start supporting the new nuclear, the new oil and gas bills that we so desperately need for that energy that people want.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I've just come from chairing the APPG on poverty, where we've heard that the cost of living crisis will exacerbate the digital divides that is experienced by so many people in poorer communities. Will the Minister agree to meet with the APPG on poverty to look at how that impacts people in Carmarthenshire, in Carmyle and right across these islands?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I meet with stakeholders who are dealing with poverty all of the time, but if the honourable gentleman is interested in dealing with poverty, perhaps he'll be able to find out from his own SNP government why poverty levels in Scotland are growing and why it is that even the Labour Party in Wales are doing a better job of dealing with child poverty than the honourable gentleman's government.
Patricia Gibson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Secretary of State does love to tell a good story, doesn't he? But the UK government has already slashed devolved budgets by billions this financial year, and on Monday, the Chancellor announced plans for millions of pounds supposed to come to devolved nations for cost of living support now to be abandoned. How does the Secretary of State think that slashing devolved budgets supports the supposed levelling up agenda?
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, just to be clear, the honourable lady gave me a bit of a promotion there. I am actually the Minister, not the Secretary of State. But Mr. Speaker, I'm not telling stories, Mr. Speaker. The figures about child poverty in Scotland come from Audit Scotland, which is responsible to the Scottish Government. So, Mr. Speaker, I suggest that the honourable lady takes a look at the other figures, which show that far from cutting the devolved budget, the UK Government has increased it every single year to Wales by £2 billion in the last financial year.
Martin Day.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Hundreds of thousands will find themselves in fuel poverty should average energy costs rise to the estimated £4,347 a year in April next year as a result of the government rolling back on its own proposals. So how does the Minister claim that his party is fighting the cost of living crisis when his government is cutting back on the few measures it has announced before they are even implemented?
Minister.
I'm afraid I didn't hear all of the question, but I believe the honourable gentleman mentioned fuel poverty, and I would just remind him once again that this government is doing absolutely everything possible to make sure that people in this country can get access to the cheap gas, the cheap electricity and the cheap petrol which they need. And it is members of the honourable gentleman's government in Scotland which are doing their best to prevent that from happening.
Even Crown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In welcoming the contributions from our friends from the Scottish National Party to this Wales office question, can I just politely remind them that this is a government that in March 2020 stepped in to save thousands of businesses in every single one of our constituencies, protecting hundreds of thousands of jobs. And doesn't that, Mr. Speaker, demonstrate that the value of staying part of a strong United Kingdom, and it demonstrates that this is a government that doesn't walk away from serious challenges but meets them head on?
Mr. Speaker, the honourable gentleman, the right honourable gentleman, makes an excellent point. I couldn't put it better than myself. This government will stand for the union, but also stand for the least well off in society.
Virginia Crosby.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Nearly 60% of my constituents on Ynysmore rely on off-grid energy for heating. The average cost of filling an oil tank has almost doubled in the last year. On behalf of my Ynysmore constituents, will the Minister look at more targeted support for those on off-grid heating and LPG gas?
Mr. Speaker, the honourable lady makes a very important point. The government have obviously already come through with a £100 payment for those who are off-grid, but I believe that there are genuine issues there, and she makes a very good point, and I'm sure that our colleagues in Bays and the Treasury will be looking carefully at what the honourable lady has said today.
Alan Kern.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Minister has referred to the significant increases in the Welsh Block Grant over the last 10 years. And this equates to £120 for every £100 that is spent in England. Now, in spite of this very fair settlement, accepted and recognised by the Welsh Government, health waiting lists are longer, education standards are falling compared to the rest of the United Kingdom, and the economy is growing much, much slower pace. Does my honourable friend agree that the Welsh Government need to focus on the right priorities, investing in public services and getting value for money?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the right honourable gentleman, my right honourable friend, was actually responsible for making sure that the Welsh Government got a more generous package than they had previously, £1.20 for every pound that is spent in England. And therefore it is very hard to understand why it is that under a Welsh Labour government the health service waiting lists have got longer, ambulance response times have got longer, people have lower standards of healthcare in Wales than they do under a Conservative-run NHS in England, and Welsh Labour need to take responsibility for that.
Derek Green.
Question number 3, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Secretary of State and I regularly engage with Cabinet Ministers on a range of transport measures. Over £340 million has already been provided for rail enhancements in Wales, including at Cardiff Central Station and for the electrification of the Severn Tunnel.
Sir Green.
Thank the Minister for his response. Can the Minister explain why Wales is not receiving the £5 billion worth of consequential funding from HS2 that it's entitled to under the Barnett formula? And will he review this decision, something the Welsh Conservative Party is also calling for?
Well, Mr. Speaker, HS2, of course, is a UK-wide project which is partly being brought forward in order to enable the maximum number of people to get out of their cars and get onto the trains and use public transport, something which I would have hoped that the Liberal Democrats would be fully supportive of. At the same time, the UK government has not only been spending money improving the rail service in Wales, but improving the rail services for travellers who go from Wales into England, such as through the Severn-tunnel electrification. The UK government has an extremely good record on supporting railways in Wales.
Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Avanti trains sometimes trundle along the rail infrastructure of North Wales, but these days it's an increasingly infrequent occurrence. Avanti have provided a shockingly poor service to the people of North Wales, and many of my constituents were deeply unhappy when the Department for Transport decided to extend their franchise for a further 6 months. It was to give them a further chance. Can my honourable friend please urge his counterpart in the Department of Transport to make sure it is their last chance?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, a number of colleagues from North Wales have discussed Avanti's performance in sort of colourful terms, and I'm sure that they will have listened to what the Right Honourable Gentleman has had to say, as will the Department for Transport, who I can confirm will be assessing their performance before any further contracts are given out.
Shadow Minister Gerald Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It seems, Mr. Speaker, that rewarding failure is this government's guiding principle. Even members on his own side agree. Avanti West Coast is the worst performing operator on the rail network, but ministers spent an eye-watering £4 million of taxpayers' money on bonuses to company executives for, quote, customer experience and acting as a good operator. Does the Minister agree that this is simply not good enough for the businesses and the people of North Wales?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I've already said that I accept that there have been many concerns raised about Avanti's performance, but of course it all goes to show why it is important to modernise the rail network across the whole of Wales, and that is exactly what the UK government are doing at the moment.
Chris Elmore.
Number 4, sir.
Tuesday.
Mr. Speaker, I have regular discussions with Cabinet colleagues on a range of topics, and of course interest rates are rightly a matter for the Independent Bank of England, and we've announced unprecedented support for households and businesses, and through our cuts to stamp duty the Welsh Government are expected to receive £70 million, enabling them to follow suit with cuts to land transaction tax in Wales.
Chris Elmore.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On the weekend, I met a young couple in their early 30s who are coming out of a 5-year fixed mortgage rate. Their mortgage is going up by more than £300 a month, and they squarely blame the government and the Prime Minister's poor mismanagement of our economy. It was the Conservative government that has U-turned that has caused the economic chaos. It's the Conservatives who has caused the mortgage rates to go through the roof. And it's the Conservative government that is causing mortgage firms to withdraw all their support. Will the Secretary of State now apologise to my constituents and people across the land who are being crippled by huge mortgage increases every single month? This is Conservative failure.
And it is a Conservative government that, through Help to Buy, has helped over 361,000 people as first-time buyers onto the housing ladder. It is a Conservative government that has led to unemployment at record lows, Mr. Speaker. It is a Conservative government that has increased the national living wage to £9.50 per hour. And it is a Conservative government that will lead to interest rates being controlled, which will also help mortgage holders too. The Honourable Gentleman's hyperbole does not serve him well.
Question number 6.
Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Most recent data demonstrates that households in Wales pay a price broadly on par with the average across Great Britain. On average, variable unit costs and standing charges for gas and electricity. And our energy price guarantee will save households hundreds of pounds this winter compared to current wholesale cost projections.
Mr. Speaker, my constituent, Mr. Evans, in the town of Kidwelly, cannot benefit from a lower tariff for electricity he uses in off-peak times because, as the engineers have explained to him, the smart meter he needs will not function owing to the almost non-existent mobile phone signal in the area. That's a failure of this UK government both to roll out mobile phone technology and to have allowed smart meters which only work on mobile phone signal. So will the Secretary now have urgent talks with ministerial colleagues to put this right and to end this discrimination?
Well, I'd be interested to take up that case in more detail with the Honourable Lady, but I think it's right to say that the government, in acting radically on energy price intervention, and indeed with its energy prices bill that seeks to break the link between electricity and gas prices, is taking the sort of action that is absolutely necessary to help households like the Honourable Lady's constituents. And I, of course, will be happy to talk further about the particular disadvantage that her constituents face.
Honourable Edmonds.
Number 7, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I have frequent discussions with my ministerial colleagues on a range of matters, including the cost of living, and as I have previously said today, we're supporting households and businesses across Wales with cost of living challenges, including on energy costs.
Mr. Speaker. People in Carmarthenshire have seen huge increases in heating costs if they're off the gas grid in oil, LPG and solid fuels. The alternative fuel payment of £100 doesn't seem to be equivalent to the cap on gas. Will you write to Welsh MPs outlining the methodology used by the British government to calculate the AFP rate?
Minister. Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm sure my colleagues in Treasury will be able to help with that. But there is one thing that the honourable gentleman could do as well if he wants to support people with cost of living challenges in Wales, and that is to persuade his colleagues in Plaid Cymru to vote against Welsh Labour's proposals to revalue council tax bands in Wales, which are going to be absolutely catastrophic for the finances of hundreds of thousands of people across Wales.
Wayne David.
Mr. Speaker.
5 minutes.
Minister.
Oh, yeah, sorry, yeah. Mr. Speaker, the 4 Welsh police forces are adequately funded and will receive combined funding of up to £826.7 million in 2022-23, an increase of up to £45.1 million when compared to the previous financial year. Gwent's funding will be up £159.1 million, an increase of £9.1 million on the previous financial year.
Wayne David.
Mr. Speaker, South Wales Police has within its area Cardiff, the capital city of Wales, and yet it gets no extra resources for the extra responsibilities which comes with it. So will the Secretary of State make representation to his colleagues in the government to address this situation and this anomaly?
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, South Wales funding will be up to £352.5 million in 2022-23, an increase of £19 million on the previous financial year. But if the honourable gentleman wants to do something to support police forces in Wales, may I suggest that he talks to the Welsh Labour government about their failure to hand over the apprenticeship levy, which is being held back by them and should be passed on to police forces so that...
Order! Just a sec. By the way, when somebody's answering the question, can you please wait till it's been completed? Mr David was asking the question. Slane Saxby.
Question 10, please, Mr Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, floating offshore wind projects in the Celtic Sea will contribute to our net zero ambitions, our energy security, and generate economic growth and create highly skilled jobs in our coastal communities. And I regularly meet the Crown Estate to discuss progress on bringing forward the ambition of 4 gigawatts of projects by 2035.
Lane Saxby.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. To realise the full potential of the Celtic Sea, we need a timely consenting process from the Welsh Government. What discussions has my right honourable friend had with his Welsh counterparts on the consenting process for the development of floating offshore wind sites?
I congratulate my honourable friend for consistent advocacy for projects in the Celtic Sea as chair of the APPG, and indeed the necessity for securing timely consents is an imperative. I will continue working with the Welsh Government and with all stakeholders to ensure that we can make sure that the huge opportunity that this presents is capitalised upon.
Sir James Davies.
Number 12, Mr Speaker.
Mr Speaker, the The Wales office has been fully supporting the North Wales growth deal as it begins to deliver projects on the ground, and my officials will work closely with all partners in North Wales to ensure that the deal continues to deliver growth and investment across the region.
Dr. James Davies.
Thank my honourable friend for that answer. Perhaps inevitably, not all projects initially identified for delivery through the North Wales growth deal can be progressed, and that applies to the Bodelwyddan key strategic site. So will my honourable friend encourage a flexible approach to diverting the £10 million of funds that had been earmarked to Bodelwyddan to other economic development projects within Denbighshire?
Here.
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it's obviously a matter for Ambition North Wales to bring forward projects for the UK Government and the Welsh Government to approve, but obviously we have taken a very flexible view towards the whole thing, and I can assure the honourable gentleman that despite the international financial problems which all countries are facing at the moment, this government remains absolutely committed to supporting jobs, driving growth and levelling up across the whole of the United Kingdom, including in the honourable gentleman's constituency.
Bob Blackman.
Question 13, Mr. Speaker.
James Day.
Mr. Speaker, investment zones will be created right across the UK, and our intention in Wales is to design and deliver the policy in working with the Welsh Government and local agencies to increase growth.
Thank my right honourable friend for the answer. And is it incumbent on the Welsh Government to cooperate fully with the Government to ensure the success for all the people of Wales?
Okay.
My honourable friend puts it extremely well. We have a good example with Freeports. I very much hope the Welsh Government steps up to the plate on investment zones.
Before we come to Prime Minister's questions, I would like to point out the British Sign Language interpretation proceedings is available to watch on Parliament Live TV. We start Prime Minister's questions with Justin Mathers.
Question number 1, please, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Justin Mathers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When the penny dropped for the Prime Minister on Monday and she realised that her budget was responsible for crashing the economy, she should have come to this House to explain herself and to apologise to the millions of people who will now be paying hundreds of pounds extra a month on their mortgages because of her mistakes. Yeah. But now she's here, can she tell us, given the absolute chaos her government has created, why the Chancellor lost his job but she kept hers?
Yeah. Mr. Speaker, I have been very clear that I am sorry and that I have made mistakes. But the right thing to do in those circumstances is to make changes, which I've made, and to get on with the job and deliver for the British people. And Mr. Speaker, we've delivered the energy price guarantee, we've helped people this winter, and I will continue to do that.
Lawrence Robertson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that local people and local councils are best placed to decide how many houses they need and where those houses should go? And if she does, will she end the top-down approach to housing targets and reduce or preferably remove the powers of the planning inspectorate?
Prime Minister.
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right. We will abolish the top-down housing targets. We want decisions about homes, about infrastructure, driven by local people, not driven by Whitehall. And that's why we're setting up new, locally driven investment zones.
We now come to the Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A book is being written about the Prime Minister's time in office. Apparently, it's going to be out by Christmas. Is that the release date or the title?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I have been in office for just under 2 months, and I have delivered the energy price guarantee, making sure that people aren't paying £6,000 bills this winter. I've reversed the national insurance increase, and I've also taken steps, and we will be taking steps, to crack down on the militant unions. Now, what, Mr. Speaker, I think, Mr. Mr. Speaker, that is more of a record of action than the honourable gentleman in his 2.5 years in the job.
Mr. Speaker, last week the Prime Minister ignored every question put to her. Instead, she repeatedly criticised Labour's plan for a 6-month freeze on energy bills. This week, the Chancellor made it her policy. How can she be held to account when she's not in charge?
Well, Mr. Speaker, our policy is to protect the most vulnerable for 2 years. I had to take the decision, because of the economic situation, to adjust our policies. I am somebody who's prepared to front up. I'm prepared to take the tough decisions. Unlike the honourable gentleman, who hasn't done anything on businesses, he's done nothing to say he'll protect people after 1 year. He's got no plan.
Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, last week the Prime Minister stood there and promised absolutely no spending reductions. They all cheered. This week, the Chancellor announced a new wave of cuts. What's the point of a Prime Minister whose promises don't even last a week?
Prime Minister.
Well, I can assure the right honourable gentleman that spending will go up next year and it will go up the year after. But of course, we need to get value for taxpayers' money. The Labour Party has pledged hundreds of billions of spending pledges, none of which they've retracted. The honourable gentleman needs to reflect the economic reality in his policies.
Mr. Speaker, those spending cuts are on the table for one reason and one reason only, because they crashed the economy. And working people are going to have to pay 500 quid more a month on their mortgages. And what's the Prime Minister's response? To say she's sorry. What does she think people will think and say? That's all right, I don't mind financial ruin. At least she apologised.
Prime Minister.
I do think there has to be some reflection of economic reality from the party opposite. The fact is that interest rates are rising across the world, and the economic conditions have worsened. And we are being honest. We're levelling with the public, unlike the honourable gentleman who simply won't do it. And what is the honourable gentleman doing about the fact that train workers are again going on strike? The fact is he refuses to condemn the workers. We are bringing forward policies. Mr. Speaker, we are bringing forward policies that are going to make sure our railways are protected, people going to work are protected. He backs the strikers, we back the strivers.
Mr. Speaker, she's asking me questions because we're a government in waiting and they're an opposition in waiting. There's no getting away from this. Millions of people are facing horrendous mortgage repayments, and she's admitted it's her fault. She shouldn't have conducted an economic experiment on the British public. But it's not just her. They put her there. They're keeping her there. Why on earth would anyone trust the Tories with the economy ever again?
I notice, Mr. Speaker, he's not actually objecting to a single economic policy that the Chancellor announced on Monday. He's refusing to condemn the strikers. We're on the side of working people. We're going to legislate to make sure we keep our railways open. The honourable gentleman refuses to do anything.
Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, the only mandate she's ever had is from members opposite. It was a mandate built on fantasy economics, and it ended in disaster. The country's got nothing to show for it except the destruction of the economy and the implosion of the Tory party. I've got the list here. 45p tax cut, gone. Corporation tax cut, gone. 20p tax cut, gone. 2-year energy freeze, gone. Tax-free shopping, gone. Economic credibility, gone. and her supposed best friend, the former Chancellor, he's gone as well. They're all gone. So why is she still here?
Mr. Speaker, I am a fighter and not a quitter. I have acted in the national interest to make sure that we have economic stability.
Prime Minister. Order. Order. I'm going to hear the Prime Minister. I suggest that all members need to hear the answer. Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I am a fighter and not a quitter. We have delivered on the energy price guarantee. We've delivered on the energy price guarantee. We've delivered on national insurance. We are going to deliver to stop the militant trade unions disrupting our railways. The honourable gentleman has no idea, he has no plan, and he has no alternative.
James Grundy. Just sit down. Sit. Can I just say, he's obviously the more popular choice. Come on, James Grundy. You've got a future.
Lee Centurion's Rugby League team on their recent promotion to Super League, bringing millions to the local economy, and furthermore, would she also guarantee that our excellent women's Euros team, including Ella Toon from my constituency, Tilsley, will receive the number 10 reception that they so deserve?
Prime Minister.
Well, I join my honourable friend in congratulating the Lee Centurions on their return to the Super League. I had the huge privilege of meeting the Lionesses last week, a fantastic team who won a major tournament for us. We will host the Downing Street reception as soon as their training programme makes them available.
I look forward to Rugby League invite as well. Let's now come to the leader of the SNP, Ian Black.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After 10 U-turns in 2 weeks, we're left with a Prime Minister in office, but not in power, and families are paying through the teeth for her mistakes. Her latest broken promise has put pensioners in the front line of Tory cuts. So, can the Prime Minister perhaps turn to her Chancellor right now, get permission to make another U-turn, and commit to raising the state pension at the rate of inflation?
Prime Minister.
I honestly don't know what the honourable gentleman is talking about, because we have been clear in our manifesto that we will maintain the triple lock, and I am completely committed to it. So is the Chancellor.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it's no surprising that the Prime Minister's approval ratings are collapsing with an answer like that. The worst polling result for any Prime Minister in history. She's just thrown 12 million pensioners under the Tory bus. And it's not just pensioners feeling the pain. In the last week alone...
I also want to hear Mr. Blackford.
Mr. Speaker, it's not just pensioners feeling the pain. In the last week alone, inflation has risen to a 40-year high. Mortgage rates are at the highest level since the financial crash. And people's energy bills are about to rise to more than £5,000. Can the Prime Minister answer one simple question? Why does she expect everyone else to pay the price for her failure?
Prime Minister.
I don't think the honourable gentleman can take yes for an answer. I've been clear we are protecting the triple lock on pensions. And if the honourable gentleman is concerned about the economy, why does he continue to advocate for separatism, which would plunge the Scottish economy into chaos?
Gary Sambrook.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Over the last couple of years, thousands of homes have been proposed or built in Birmingham Northfield constituency, which puts a huge strain on GP and dentist appointments. Would my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, agree with me that more needs to be done in the planning process to make sure that when we have large-scale developments, we have more capacity in those vital services?
Prime Minister.
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right. When we build new houses, we need to make sure there are GP surgeries, schools, infrastructure, and that's why we're introducing a new infrastructure levy to make sure more of the money from developers goes on supporting local communities.
Ed Davey.
Mr. Speaker, millions of family carers have been forced to cut back on food and heating. One told Carers UK, "My son is incontinent. If we don't wash him in warm water several times a day, this will cause him to physically decline." So how do we pay for the gas to heat the water if we are currently at max budget? Vulnerable people and carers are struggling enough already in this cost of living crisis, Mr. Speaker. So will the Prime Minister guarantee that support for the vulnerable, including carers allowance, will rise by at least today's inflation rate of 10.1%?
Prime Minister.
People are struggling. It is difficult at the moment. That's why we put in place the energy price guarantee to make sure the typical household isn't paying more than £2,500. It's why we've supplied an extra £1,200 of support to the most vulnerable. And I can assure the right honourable gentleman we will always support the most vulnerable. They will be our priority.
Hey, Jones.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Brecon and Radnorshire has a proud military footprint. Not least the Cambrian Patrol exercise, which I visited last week. It is considered the Olympic gold medal in infantry training, attracting teams from across the world to compete in a 60-kilometre march over 2 days in the Brecon Beacons. Will the Prime Minister join me in congratulating all those who took part, not least the team of Gurkha soldiers from the Infantry Battle School in Brecon who took home a coveted gold medal, further cementing Brecon's special place in the UK Armed Forces?
I join my honourable friend in thanking everybody at Brecon Barracks who organises the exercise Cambrian Patrol each year. It is a world-class training exercise, and I congratulate Brecon's Gurkha soldiers for their fantastic achievement of a gold medal. Well done.
Dr. Philippa Whitford.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It took just 5 working days for the Prime Minister to crash the pound, damage pension funds and send people's mortgage costs spiralling. Her new Chancellor may have reversed almost all of her policies, but the damage has been done, and we now face yet another round of Tory cuts and austerity. So I'd like to ask the Prime Minister and those sitting behind her, why is she still at the dispatch box, and when will voters get their say on this disastrous government?
Prime Minister.
We are facing very, very difficult economic times. I took the decision I had to in the interest of economic stability. And what is important is we work together, including with the SNP, to get through this winter and grow the economy.
David Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister is to be commended for securing the passage of the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill through this House without amendment before the summer recess. Can she confirm that it's the government's intention that the bill should remain unamended, and in particular that the European Court of Justice should have no jurisdiction in any part of the United Kingdom?
Prime Minister.
I am completely committed to the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill. It deals with the very specific issues we face in Northern Ireland, the free flow of trade, and also making sure that the people of Northern Ireland are able to benefit from being part of the United Kingdom. And I can tell my honourable friend that any negotiations will reflect the same position that is in the Protocol Bill.
Dave McHillier.
Mr. Speaker, we understand that this afternoon's vote on fracking is deemed a confidence vote in the Prime Minister. Can she give us any reason why her own backbenchers or anyone in this country can have confidence in her after her policies have caused chaos in the markets and wrecked the economy?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we do face very difficult economic times. I have been honest about the mistakes I have made. But what I don't apologise for is the fact that we have helped households through this winter, through the energy price guarantee, the fact that we've reversed the national insurance rise, and the fact we are taking action to get our railways running rather than being disrupted by the militant trade unions she supports.
John Barron.
Mr. Speaker, there's been a number of low points recently, including the Republic of Ireland's football team singing pro-IRA songs in the changing room. We should never forget the sacrifice of those who paid the price to maintain the peace during the Troubles. Closer to home, recent events meant that spending is going to be more constrained than originally thought. May I encourage the Prime Minister to ensure that we retain compassion in politics in these decisions, including maintaining the link between benefits and inflation. Will she do that?
Prime Minister.
We are compassionate Conservatives. We will always work to protect the most vulnerable, and that is what we did with the energy price guarantee. We are going to make sure the most vulnerable are protected into year 2, and I'm sure the Chancellor has heard my honourable friend's representations on the contents of the medium-term fiscal plan.
Stuart Malcolm MacDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, like the public at large, I've supported the government in terms of the actions it has taken to support Ukraine, not least because of what's at stake there. But right now, in order to maintain that support, as the public deals with rising prices, inflation, mortgage costs and much else, Ukraine fatigue is a real and present danger. And I'm afraid to say to the Prime Minister, she is now an active driver against that public support that has so unified many of us, many of us to do what needs to be done. So in a time where resolve in support of Ukraine needs to be steeled, will she make sure that she commits from the dispatch box that the economic and military and political support won't be another casualty under this Prime Minister?
It was one of my first acts in office to make sure the military support we give to Ukraine is equal to the military support we gave this year. We must make sure Ukraine win. They can win, they will win, and they must win.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to thank the Prime Minister for sticking by her words and giving communities in Fylde the final say on fracking. But as always, the devil is in the detail. Can the Prime Minister assure me that local consent will be measured independently and transparently, and under no circumstances will fracking companies be directly engaged in assessing local consent? And if people in Fylde say no, that view and that decision will be respected and acted upon by this government?
Well, I very strongly agree with my honourable friend. I know this is something he cares deeply about. I can assure him that we will consult on the robust system of local consent, give clear advice on seismic limits and safety before any fracking takes place. And the consultation will consider all of the relevant people, the regional mayors, the local authorities and parishes, as well as the concerns of those directly affected. And my right honourable friend, the Business Secretary, will be saying more about this later today.
Kate Osborne.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Privatisation does not work. It doesn't work for our NHS. We have another Amber Alert in the NHS Blood Service, a service that this week's Chancellor sold when he was Health Secretary. And it doesn't work for our postal service, with Royal Mail Group taking £758 million in profit last year, yet our universal service obligation is at risk. Workers' pay conditions and 10,000 jobs are at threat. Will the Prime Minister continue to let obscene amounts of profit be made while services are cut and stamp prices rise, or will she launch an inquiry into the gross mismanagement of Royal Mail?
Prime Minister.
What we need is an efficient postal service that delivers for people across this country, and that's what I'm focused on, not making ideological points.
Duncan Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When I was in business, it was a real privilege to employ very many talented, bright young people. I always found that when you believed in somebody, when you gave them the opportunity, they went on to thrive in their career. That's why tomorrow, in North Norfolk, I'll be launching my new scheme, the 100 Apprenticeship Challenge, to drive 100 new apprenticeships all over a rural constituency. Would the Prime Minister please thank not just my DWP office and Julia Nix, who's been fantastic, the district councils, the county councils, and an awful lot of stakeholders who worked for over 6 months to deliver this fantastic scheme to drive growth and jobs for young people across my constituency.
Well, I do want to thank Julia and her team for the fantastic job they're doing, and also you as the local member of, my right honourable friend as the local member of Parliament. Apprenticeships are a fantastic way for people to learn and gain experience, and I'm proud that we've created 5.1 million apprenticeships since 2010.
Smith.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff is in hot water after lobbying on behalf of a Libyan warlord and big tobacco. It turns out he's also lobbied for PPE giants Sante Global. Is it wise to have a lobbyist at the centre of Downing Street?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, all appointments in Downing Street are properly checked through the propriety and ethics process, and that is the way that we do it in a completely impartial way.
Andrew Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When my right honourable friend was Foreign Secretary, I know that she was acutely aware of the importance of British soft power acting in our national interest. Will she confirm today the promise we both made in 2010 when this government first came into office, that she will not balance the books on the backs of the poorest people in the world?
Minister.
Well, can I pay tribute to my right honourable friend for the fantastic work he did as International Development Secretary, and I am proud that we have rebalanced our international development budget to focus more on humanitarian aid and more on women and girls, and no doubt more details will be set out in due course.
Sarah Owen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The last Tory Prime Minister was forced out after a series of dodgy dealings and failing to take responsibility for any of it. So what's this Prime Minister getting the boot for? Her plan that crashed the economy, forcing fracking on communities who don't want it? Or will she do the decent thing and go and call a general election?
I have taken responsibility, and I have made the right decision in the interests of the country's economic stability.
Steve Bright.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Every single member in this House will have constituents waiting for treatment within the COVID backlog. The Health Secretary's priorities are absolutely right, including her B for tackling the backlogs. Can the Prime Minister reassure me that the government is committed to the series of elective hubs that we've promised, including at the Royal Hampshire County Hospital in my Winchester constituency?
Prime Minister.
Well, my right honourable friend, the Health Secretary, has set out her plans to deliver on dealing with the COVID backlog, and she will continue to work on that and make sure we deal with what was a massive pandemic, creating a backlog. We will deal with it.
Bernie Gardner.
Since the mini-budget, thousands of my constituents have been in mental anguish and despair. I recognise that the Honourable Lady has faced a week of mental anguish and despair herself. She has had people angry with her, she's had people who have mocked her. But having had that experience, what will she now do to improve the healthcare, the mental health care for people in this country, so that the anguish that they face in the coming months is properly responded to and dealt with?
I could say
My right honourable friend, the Health Secretary, has set out a very clear plan of how we're going to deal with the backlog created by COVID, how we're going to make sure people get timely GP appointments, and how we're going to improve on the services in our hospitals, including mental health services.
Waitley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government is facing tough choices, but people living with dementia face unlimited care costs, and that is not a choice. Can my right honourable friend assure me that she is committed to social care reform to end that worry and relieve pressure on the NHS?
Prime Minister.
Yes, we are committed to social care reform. We do need to deal with those issues.
Greasy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's always better to see a Prime Minister at her desk rather than underneath it. And now that she's here, I wonder if she could tell us why next week this House will be discussing legislation that will abolish vital protections on pension payouts. It will abolish our right to watch the Olympics free of charge and airline consumer laws. How is any of the retained law bill in the British interest?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think we have yet another example of somebody who doesn't want to support the British public's decision to leave the European Union in 2016. Isn't it quite incredible, Mr. Speaker, that 6 years after people voted to leave the European Union, there are people who object to taking EU law off our statute books. Now, I'm a Democrat. I respect what British people voted for. I suggest the Right Honourable Lady does the same.
Richard Graham.
Mr. Speaker, 30 years ago, the Westminster Foundation for Democracy was created out of the war in Bosnia so that democracies could flourish and freedom and prosperity come with it. This evening, in your rooms, we celebrate that anniversary by hearing directly from our country representative in Ukraine, from the chair of the Taiwanese Foreign Affairs Committee, and the leader of the opposition in Uganda. A good example of the range of contacts that this great cross-party body funded by government is working with. Can I ask the Prime Minister if she agrees that this is a vital contribution by our government and our people to democracy around the world, and will she encourage members around the House to join us this evening?
Prime Minister.
Well, the Westminster Foundation for Democracy does a fantastic job, and I think we know from what has happened in Ukraine, the appalling war perpetrated by Vladimir Putin, just how precious democracy is and how much we need to do to work with our friends and allies to protect democracy around the world. And I do encourage colleagues from all sides of the House to attend the event tonight.
That now completes Prime Minister's questions. I'll let the House clear. Just let them go. Right, point of order, Ian Duncan Smith.
Mr. Speaker, I'm grateful to catch your eye on this, and I seek your guidance. Yesterday, the Foreign Office Minister was in a way dragged to the House to answer a question about what the government would do over these brutal attacks that took place in Manchester, inside a city, which the Chinese representatives were assaulting an individual and also tearing down and creating vandalism outside. The Minister said that the officials would be called to the Foreign Office to meet a Minister of the Crown, instead of which today we discover they met an official who simply rap them over the knuckles by saying they should stand by the freedoms that we have in this country. Can I ask, therefore, is it feasible for us to get the Minister back to the dispatch box to ask why were they not told that if they do not follow our rules, they get expelled, and to say that all those responsible for the assault in Manchester will be expelled from this country?
Obviously, it's not a direct matter for me, but what I would say, and I think there are many avenues that could be pursued, and I'm sure that a UQ could possibly and likely be submitted. I'm not saying it will be accepted, but it could be looked on favourably, because I think we were all appalled by those images, and quite rightly, action needs to be taken. Right. Rachel Maskell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This morning, the Transport Select Committee heard from the Transport Secretary that the government will axe its commitment to create Great British Railways in this parliamentary session. There has been no written statement to announce this decision, and I am not aware that application has been made to you, Mr. Speaker, for an oral statement either by the Secretary of State. We were expecting a transport bill in this session to facilitate the transition of the operations of rail to Great British Railways and to create a controlling mind for the railways out of the chaos which has existed since the Conservative government fragmented and privatised rail in 1993. As part of this process, the former Transport Secretary launched a competition with huge fanfare for a future headquarters of the railway. 42 locations applied, 6 were shortlisted, and have expended huge amounts in order to win this. Yep.
I'm just going to... No, please. The point is, a point of order is meant to be a point of order, not a full statement about government policy and everything. So I'm sure you're going to come to the end quickly. Thank you.
Thank you for your guidance, Mr. Speaker. Thousands of jobs could be at stake as a result of this. So could you please advise me how I can take this matter forward, since the Secretary of State seems to have failed to write either a written statement or bring forward an oral statement to this House?
Can I first of all say I'm grateful to the honourable member for giving me notice of a point of order. The honourable member has put a point on the record, and I recognise this is a very important issue to other members as well. As there is an important policy development on this issue, I would expect it to be announced in this House first, and I'm sure the government benches will have heard this exchange, and I'm sure the honourable member will pursue this matter in different avenues that are available to her. Now then, Gregory Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On a procedural matter, yesterday morning I was successful in having a debate in Westminster Hall, and it was entitled that this House has considered British passport ownership by Northern Ireland residents. This is a matter I've taken up over many years, and Mr. Speaker, it remains unresolved. But on every other occasion that I took the matter up, it was Home Office ministers that responded, and I had hoped that the word British passport ownership might have given a clue to the Home Office to ensure that a Home Office minister actually replied. While I was glad to have a Northern Ireland Office minister to reply, can you, Mr. Speaker, ensure that the appropriate ministerial department responds to debates such as this one in the future?
What I would say is I'm also grateful to the honourable member giving notice of a point of order. The decision about which the minister should respond to a debate is unfortunately a matter for the government rather than for the chair. However, I am sure the government benches will have heard the comments and will bear them in mind and regard to, and I know the honourable member will also pursue through the different avenues. Tim Farrell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On a point of order, you may be aware, sir, that today the Right Honourable Member for Calder Valley, the Government Deputy Chief Whip, has written to Conservative members telling them regarding the debate this afternoon on fracking, and I quote, "This is not a motion on fracking, this is a confidence motion in the government." Would he give guidance to all sides of the House, but in particular to the Prime Minister, what would happen in the event that the government was to lose that vote this afternoon? If the government has lost the confidence of the House, surely, and I would be grateful for your guidance, that would mean that the Prime Minister must then go to the Palace, see His Majesty the King, and ask for a dissolution of Parliament and a general election. Am I right? Would he give clarity?
First of all, I'm not going to enter into a debate on internal communications, and I've no doubt that he'll have had some of his own communications, which happens within all parties, and if it doesn't, I will be shocked. What I would say is, let's not prejudge the decision what may take place later. And as you know, you asked the question because you knew the answer. Dr. Whitford.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. In her response to some of the questions today, the Prime Minister claimed that no household would pay more than £2,500 a year. The £2,500 is an average, and therefore almost half of households will pay more. So how do we go about getting the Prime Minister to correct that in the record? She said no one would pay more, and that is incorrect.
I'm not going to continue the debate. It's not for me to answer, but you certainly put it on the record. Now then, let's come to... No, hang on, with one more important one here. Angus Brendan McNeill.
Mr. Speaker. Clearly, UK politics now more resembles Germany, with the Chancellor effectively in charge. So why was the member for South West Norfolk answering for the government at the last question time, when in fact the member for South West Surrey is in charge?
Not a point of order, as you well know. That was a poor effort. You're better than that normally. Come on, Chris Brown.
I'm very grateful, Mr. Speaker. This is further to the point of order from the former leader of the Liberal Democrats earlier. You're quite right, of course. It's not for you to comment on internal communications amongst Conservative MPs. However, by tradition, when a motion is being declared a motion of no confidence or of confidence by the government, the Prime Minister makes that announcement at some point during the debate. Is there any means whereby she could do so today? That is certainly, as I understand it, I look across the faces over there, they all seem to think it is now a motion of confidence. And historically, in every situation, lots of different things have been made, have been made confidence motions in the past, including the conduct of war, including various different bills. Traditionally, every single time that has happened in the past and the government has lost, it has led to a general election. Is that not just factually correct?
And you've certainly put on the record, but I would say once again, let's wait and see what this afternoon unfolds, and we will see where we go from there. Right, no further points of order. I now come to a 10-minute rule bill from Kenny McCaskill.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that leave be given to bring in a bill to abolish higher standing charges for customers with prepayment meters, to require energy companies to provide social tariffs for low-income customers and for connected purposes. Energy costs are the social and economic issue of our time, yet the steps taken to mitigate the pain of rises is far from adequate. Fuel poverty